Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share yet another update on my experience with the Gigabyte Aero 15. Now, for those of you that have been following my coverage of this laptop as well as the Asus G15 right here, you know I consider both of them to be some of the best hardware ever made, but neither is perfect. Both have issues of their own, and in my previous updates about this Aero 15, again, refreshed for 2021, which sports an Intel 108700H, that's an i7 8-core CPU, and NVIDIA's RTX 3060, at least in this build, 16 gigs of RAM, a ½ terabyte NVMe drive, and a gorgeous 15.6-inch 4K Samsung OLED display. You already know that I've kind of felt like the Aero was nearly perfect, and it occupies a space that is really all its own. It's aimed at content creators that also may want to game, and it makes sense. Best of both worlds. Beautiful RGB backlit keyboard that right now I have turned off. It's got Thunderbolt 3. It has HDMI 2.1. These are things that are missing from the Asus G15, for those of you that have followed my coverage. The comparison video specifically of these two, it also has a webcam with a privacy cover, although it is an up-the-nose webcam, which I pretty much despise. It's still better than not having one at all. And this thing can game. It's got chops. Granted, it's only a 60 hertz panel. It is an OLED. It is 4K, and you really can game even with the 3060 in 4K, and it is quite the experience. And by the way, the RGB lighting for the keys is per key, so it's pretty amazing. And you actually have a numerical keypad, which for those of you that care about it, it's great to have. Fingerprint scanner right there. But today's video, unfortunately, it's about some issues I'm having with this. Previously, my experience had been sound, solid, everything looked good. In fact, I was just about ready to say, you know, the Aero 15 is the machine that I'm going with. The G15 has, unfortunately, a little bit of a laundry list of problems that might get solved down the road, but I need something now. I need something today, not down the road. However, two issues have presented themselves. And keep in mind, the Aero 15 was not performing as well as the G15 in benchmarking because, well, it can't. Its CPU and GPU are both inferior. Remember, the Intel 8-core processor here, it's good. It's not as powerful as the AMD Ryzen 9 5900HS, just like the 3060 in here is not as powerful as the 3070 in the Asus. But in spite of all of that, you do have the ability to upgrade the RAM freely, no soldered RAM, and I do prefer having an OLED at 4K res. Even though both the Asus and this machine are color accurate, I'd rather have the 4K display and really do any serious gaming on an external monitor. So to me, this was best of both worlds. But one of the defining features that differentiated this from the G15, the Asus, was the Thunderbolt 3 port. And, you know, I've been using it. It's been working fine. Well, today it quit. I had this docked, something that I can't do with the Asus G15, and all of a sudden, it just stopped functioning. Now the port is completely dead. At first, I thought maybe it was the dock, Thunderbolt dock, but it is not. This Thunderbolt 3 port on the right side of the machine cannot detect anything. Now, inside of Device Manager, it is showing that it's functioning, but I've already tried reinstalling drivers for it to no avail. So, where does this really leave me? I don't know what to tell you. You know, it's not showing up right now, so that's why you're not even wondering if it's an issue. And if I scroll down to the Thunderbolt controller, it's going to show that everything is kosher. But I can assure you, it detects nothing. So even though it's reporting it's washed out on the screen, sorry, this is a really bright display, and I have it at 70%. I'd have to take it down even more. Look at that. I've got to drop it to 30%, and I'm sorry that you couldn't see that before. Still not a great angle. This is as far back, by the way, as this display opens up. It's not like the G15 where it can go completely flat. But the point is that the Thunderbolt 3 port is dead on this machine. Now, do I think every unit's going to have this problem? Absolutely not. I can't do an exchange with the vendor I purchased it from because they are currently out of stock. Apparently this machine is more popular than you might think. So that's one issue. The other one that I wanted to mention, and that's a pretty big issue, by the way. It's kind of a deal breaker for me because the big edge that this machine has over the G15 is Thunderbolt support and HDMI 2.1 out. So the HDMI 2.1 out, it works perfectly fine, but I am, for some odd reason, have not been able to get 10-bit video out of this, which I absolutely expected. There's no reason in my mind that the 3060 wouldn't be able to output 10-bit video. For some reason, with my HP Dreamcolor display, I can't make it happen. If you have any thoughts, chime in. I have not tried the DisplayPort yet. I have a DisplayPort cable that should be arriving, I think, on Monday to test that out, because this is a mini DisplayPort, not a standard one, and I didn't have a mini DisplayPort that supported 4K 120 Hertz. So I wanted to make sure I got one that did, just in case, I wanted to game with this, not just get 10-bit 4K output, but actually 120 Hertz, since I have monitors that support it through DisplayPort, not through HDMI. I do have, of course, my LG CX, but that's in my studio, and that's not where this is primarily necessarily going to live. I have other monitors that support 4K 120 Hertz over DisplayPort. They don't have HDMI 2.1. So we've discussed the Thunderbolt 3 issue. The other one, which apparently is a Gigabyte special, is that I've been getting a pop-up quite often, a Windows dialog box telling me to please check panel HWID. Now, this is my first Gigabyte laptop, maybe my last. I'm joking, but it's my first that I'm actually testing, reviewing, that I ever purchased. And upon Googling that, it seems to be an issue with the Gigabyte Command Center, the Control Center, whatever it's called. And I can tell you, it's something I think I mentioned in one of my first videos. The Gigabyte Control Center is pretty bad. It makes the Asus Armory crate look like a gem. And I say that not because it doesn't work. I mean, the smart dashboard works. The app shortcuts work, the manager for for all the different settings, it works. But, and of course the keyboard, the RGB, works. The problem, just turn it on, there you go, you got red. I mean, it'll do per key. You can change it. I've already discussed this in other videos. I don't want to really go crazy with this. But the real issue here is with the smart utility for updating software. That is where it just totally fails. So basically, if I hit update or all, essentially, even though I've done this multiple times, it acts the same way it did on day one. And by the way, I have uninstalled and reinstalled the Control Center directly from Gigabyte's support page for this machine. It has made no difference with this prompt for the HWID. So I can't resolve that, at least thus far. And from what I've seen online, no one else has resolved it either. So that's not good. But I mentioned this whole Gigabyte Control Center versus the My Asus update. I like it that it's all built into one, whereas in the Armory crate, you don't get firmware or BIOS updates. You have to go to the My Asus for that. But this thing will act like it's 1995. So basically something that should be turnkey, you push you touch update and you start it, which I'm going to do right now. It creates the restore point. It should zoom through this. That's exactly what the G15 did. But with this machine, and again, it's Gigabyte software, it's not the machine itself, this process takes forever. And when it's done, it will actually effectively roll back things rather than update them. So it's not even smart enough to actually detect the correct software that it's running and update accordingly. So in, for example, the case of the NVIDIA GPU, it will absolutely roll that back to whatever Gigabyte thinks is the latest version. Now that could be because it's using the studio drivers rather than the game ready, but I can tell you right now, you don't want to do that. And you're going to see, because right now it's cruising through the chipset drivers, but once it gets to the NVIDIA drivers and then others, it'll take all day. And it doesn't matter, the first day I set this up, I thought it was because maybe the Wi-Fi chipset was kind of bogus, so I hardwired it. It made absolutely no difference. So this is something I wanted to make all of you aware of, because it's not, it doesn't make the machine bad, but it certainly reminds you of the size of Gigabyte as a company, that they're a much smaller manufacturer when it comes to laptops, at least. They do make a lot of hardware, but when it comes to laptops, they don't make a ton of them. You know, they've got this, the Aorus line, and I don't think there's anything else. And these are really based on reference designs. So something to be aware of. Another thing that I noticed is, you see that wobble right now? I don't mean the screen, but I mean the actual deck. Now, I don't know if this is just from me using it, but it seems like the deck may have flexed a little bit. And now when this is on a flat surface, at least this part of the deck, the wrist rest does not sit flush. Now, you may think I'm being too anal. That's perfectly fine. Everyone's got their own threshold. But it doesn't sit flush. Left side doesn't move. Right side does. And this wasn't like this on day 1, 2, 3, 4. The first week didn't have it. So I needed to let all of you know about that as well. Otherwise, you know, performance is still good, but between the Thunderbolt port being, I hope it's not dead, but it seems to be. I'm going to work on it more. If you have any suggestions, chime in the comments, please. I'm getting ready next to delete it from Device Manager and just let the machine, you know, redetect it, reinstall drivers again, even though I've already kind of done that, and hope that there's some kind of fix for this. It's hard for me to believe that the Thunderbolt 3 port died so quickly, that quality control could be that bad, but it's possible. And then again, this little bit of wobble, if that's from me picking up the machine on one side, the chassis actually bent, which is possible. I doubt it, but it's possible. That's not great either. I mean, that's not even happening with the plastic G15 over here. And the G15 from Asus is a combo of metal and plastic, but this is definitely more of a metal build. So I'm kind of shocked. At the end of the day, the Aero 15 is still one of a kind, with its port selection, with its keyboard, especially the numpad, and then most importantly to me, the gorgeous 4K OLED that is simply unmatched in this form factor. And battery life is good too. I mean, we're taught here it's starting to do this hang, and you would think this would be instantaneous. By the way, I'm in the same, my studio is where my router is, so it's not like I'm more than 10 feet away from the router, which is a Wi-Fi 6 Orbi Mesh system. So, the control center from Gigabyte, not so great, and that's another thing I've got to tell you. You know, it's not all perfect. I'm going to stop this because this is just the beginning of how slow this process will be. And by the way, everything is up to date. So the fact that it even thinks it needs to back things up is pretty crap. Now, the Azure AI, I think is kind of bogus. You know, I've played with it. I've gone into battery saving mode. You know, Gigabyte likes to claim it's the only machine with Azure AI, meaning that the AI over time will continue to determine what components need to be used and optimize overall performance based on your habits and what you're doing with the machine. I've seen no such thing. Battery life is a solid 6 hours, maybe less. That's with me keeping brightness at about 70%, which to me is optimal. I can get more battery if I lower the brightness down to what it's at now. I mean, I think I said it was at 30%. Yeah, it is. So, you know, you can definitely pull out some more battery life, no question about it. I have no problem with the battery life. Perfectly content with it. The Thunderbolt 3 port being dead, I have an issue with, obviously. And also this, again, the fact that the deck for some reason is not level anymore. I assure you I didn't do anything to mishandle it. There were no accidents, so it's just very weird that that's going on. But that's the update. It's still, you know, I don't think the gaming margin is that huge between the 3060 and the 3070. Nor do I think the actual performance margin is that big between the Intel i7 8-core chip and the Ryzen 9. Even though the Ryzen 9 smokes it on synthetic benchmarking, in real world, it's basically a wash. So, the one thing I can tell you is this machine does run hotter than the AMD-driven G15. But when it comes to the fan noise, you can keep it quiet and it's virtually silent. That does bring me to one last thing I noticed, which is that the command center, again a knock against Gigabyte software, in device settings, that's where you can pick the profile for the fan profile. Gaming, normal, quiet, or deep control. It doesn't seem to stick. Whatever I set it in, and again, if you know something I don't, chime in the comments. But if I keep it on quiet, a lot of times when I wake the laptop up, it's no longer in quiet. It's defaulted to something else, like normal. Likewise on reboots. So it doesn't seem to stick. This is yet another thing I've noticed. If you know something, please share it. I still actually prefer the Aero 15 over the G15 from a build quality standpoint, aesthetic, and of course the I/O and the keyboard, but, and most importantly, the 4K OLED. I mean, that gets me every time. But if I can't get the Thunderbolt 3 port rectified, I mean, I don't really like the prospect of an exchange. I'll do it if I have to, but the fact that now I've got a small, growing list of quality control problems with the Aero, well, that makes the Asus look a lot more attractive, considering they are close in price, $1,600 versus $1,800 before tax. And, you know, even though 200 plus tax, it's not a huge difference, it's still a difference, and you are getting more, basically, with the G15, in that you are getting a better processor and a better GPU. But that's about it. Here, I feel like you're getting more with regard to the display, keyboard, I/O, webcam, everything. So, I'm stuck in between a rock and a hard place, for lack of a better way of putting it. But that rounds things out on my update on the Gigabyte Aero 15. I hope I can get things rectified with the Thunderbolt 3 port, because I guess I could live with the wobble. Again, I don't know how this has happened, but it has. I don't know if the rubber foot somehow is, you know, getting worn down, or these, I don't know. I don't know. And I certainly prefer the fact that this is, you know, able to be upgraded and maintain dual channel performance, because nothing is soldered when it comes to the RAM, unlike the Asus. But these are some new problems I was not facing with, of course, the G15, or excuse me, that I was not facing with this model, and now I am, and I don't have them with the G15. The G15, the problem is still the popping speakers. Stability seems sound. So I don't want to say I'm back to square one, but, you know, unless I figure out what's going on with the Aero, the Asus looks like it's starting to pull ahead, even if it is the uglier machine. It is the more powerful, slightly less versatile because of the I/O, and of course, no 4K OLED, which I wish it had. But that's the update. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button, and as usual, please feel free to subscribe, and please stay safe. Later.